After World War I ended, conditions in Germany were so poor it gave way for someone like Adolf Hitler to rise to power. The country had to accept the blame of the war. They were left with nothing but political instability, economic ruin, and unemployment. The terms of the Treaty of Versailles gave little ability for the country to recover after the war. The rise of extremist groups increases as they attempt to grasp power from the unstable government. Left and right-wing extremists took much of the focus. One group that formed was the Nazi Party in 1919. Adolf Hitler joined the party not long after its inception. Many German soldiers felt stabbed in the back that they did not truly lost on the battlefield. The Nazi program planned to form a Greater Germany and abolish the treaty. It did not appeal to communists or the well-educated, but was popular with the rich and racists of Germany. In 1923, the party is very popular in Bavaria. The group is firmly under control of Adolf Hitler, and they try to take control, but the coup fails and Hitler is arrested. While in jail, Hitler writes a novel, Mein Kampf. The Nazis begin to use force to prevent uprisings, gain power in the government, support military power, and wins, and impress the masses with a bombardment of propaganda. Germany is in desperate need of a strong leader, and Hitler becomes the Chancellor on January 30th, 1933. Now that the Nazi regime was in place, Hitler began to take steps into violating the Treaty of Versailles. He ordered a program to rearm Germany. Germany invades the Rhineland. Hitler reunites Germany with Austria. Czechoslovakia becomes part of the Third Reich. To prevent another war, Britain and France attempt to appease Hitler. Another series of steps bring Hitler ultimate power. First, he had become Chancellor. Next, the Reichstag fire, the Enabling Act, followed by the Night of the Long Knives, the death of President Hindenburg, and finally an oath of Germans giving their loyalty to Hitler. And thus he becomes Der Führer. Another one who was not up to Der Führer standards, or who were not of the Aryan race, were enemies of the state. This included communists, social democrats, Jews, trade unionists, work-shy, homosexuals, gypsies, Germans who bought from the Jews, mentally or physically disabled, pacifists, radical Christians, and anyone who criticized Hitler or the Nazi Party. Hitler did not have enough. He wanted Lebensraum. Hitler's next move was invading Poland, which began the Second World War. In 1938, Hitler threatened war, but promised that this was the last problem to be solved. Neville Chamberlain decided that Hitler was a man who can be relied on, and persuaded the Czechs to hand over the Sudetenland. Hitler invaded Poland on September 1st. Britain and France declare war on Germany 2 days later. Germany invaded France, Belgium, and Holland, and Western Europe encountered the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. Germany's combination of fast armored tanks on land and superiority in the air made a unified attack force that was both innovative and effective. The bombing of Britain's cities lasted throughout the war, killing nearly 40,000 people in June of 1941. Hitler invaded Russia. The invasion was called Operation Barbarossa. The Japanese mounted a surprise attack on U.S. Navy base of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7th. In June 1942, the U.S. Navy had inflicted a smashing defeat on the Japanese Navy, although the performance of the 3 American carrier air groups would later be considered uneven. Their pilots and crew had won the day through courage, determination, and heroic sacrifice. The Japanese lost 4 large carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor, while the Americans only lost 1 carrier. This was the last battle of Midway, and was a major turning point in the war, giving the U.S. a lead in the Pacific. By 1944, the Germans knew that the Allies, also now including the United States among others, would attempt an invasion of France to liberate Europe from Germany. The Allied forces based in Britain decided to begin the invasion by landing a huge army at a place called Normandy Beach. This was located on the northwest coast of France, codenamed Operation Overlord, and commanded by American General Dwight D. Eisenhower. The Allies landed on June 6, 1944 at 5 beaches in Normandy area, which the code names of Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The failure to successfully defend the Normandy marked the beginning of the end for Germany. In January 1945, facing a siege of Berlin by the Soviets, Hitler withdrew to his bunker to live out his final days. He committed suicide on April 30th, 1945. 8 days later, on May 8th, the Germany's forces issued a surrender. Throughout World War II, a series of unimaginable crimes were committed by nearly all sides. The most famous of these atrocities was the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, indescribable events took place, ranging from mass murder through gassing to torture. The Jews who were unfortunately captured were shipped to various concentration camps and death camps throughout Europe, where they went through a process of selection. These Jews who were not immediately murdered had to endure hunger, disease, unbearable workloads, or destruction through work, experimentation and torture, and the ever-present fear of dying. The people who survived the Holocaust were never the same again. Some had to live with a broken heart after losing their families, while others had to live in fear. One of the common ways that the survivors helped cope with the memories was through art. Art not only allowed the survivors to express their emotions and cope with their memories, but it also gave historians a better understanding of what went on inside, as there often were no pictures. The works of art were even used to prosecute those accused of playing a major role in the Holocaust. Another major atrocity was Japanese internment. As a result of Pearl Harbor, Americans became very paranoid that Japanese civilians were waiting for a signal to attack. As a result, the United States ordered all people of Japanese origins to live in concentration camps. However, with the exception of very few, all the Japanese sent away to the camps were innocent citizens living with their families. They had their lives, including their hopes and dreams, torn apart for no reason, and were forced to live in terrible conditions, much like those camps of the Holocaust. The U.S.'s only response in the end was to give simple apology and a meager amount of money. Another atrocity was the notorious rape of Nanking. This event, made well known by Iris Chang's book, included a series of horrible events of the innocent Chinese citizens of Nanking by the Japanese soldiers, in particular the raping of more than 20,000 women of all ages. It is also well known for the brutality of the Japanese soldiers to the Chinese POWs. The Japanese believed that prisoners of war were disgraceful and did their best to make them suffer, including forcing them to march 65 excruciating miles on the Bataan Death March. At the end of the war, the last atrocities committed were the dropping of the atomic bombs on the helpless Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The destruction caused by the 2 bombs on the cities was unimaginable. Thousands of people died, and thousands more who were not immediately killed by the bombs suffered through unbearable pain from radiation poisoning, only later to die as well. As a result of this, the Japanese were forced to surrender, bringing about the end of the war and all the atrocities that occurred during it. The Cold War then begins in 1945 because of tension and rivalry between the U.S. and the USSR. This was never a real war, but they very often came close to one. These two countries were complete opposites, for America was capitalist and the Soviet Union was communist. Stalin's goal was to spread communism worldwide, but U.S. President Truman wished to contain communism in Russia. America was afraid that the domino effect would occur, where one nation falls under communists, then another, and then another. To prevent this, U.S. establishes a policy of containment to make sure that communist rule would not extend away from Russia. This then led to the creation of the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. This was to ensure that the U.S. should support those countries that were resisting takeovers and to aid Europe from the ravages of World War II. As the U.S. and the Soviet Union's rivalry grows stronger, the space race grew out of the Cold War. These two countries were the most powerful nations after World War II, and for half a century they competed to be the best in the field of space exploration. These two countries were obsessed with superiority and both wanted to come out on top, whether it was who accomplished more in space or who had a bigger and better supply of weaponry. Once Stalin died, Khrushchev took over and the arms race began. Once the development of missiles came upon Russia, they built missile bases in Cuba, which worried America and made them vulnerable to attack. But this quickly came to an end as Khrushchev agreed to remove missiles from Cuba and the U.S. agreed not to invade Cuba.